We have a great program here tonight with a wonderful slate of out LGBTQ candidates from around Washington State. We are so lucky to have such a wealth of amazing candidates bringing all their different perspectives to their communities all around our state. Want to thank Amazon for sponsoring our civic engagement series this year and help makes this program possible. And so now to start us off, I would like to introduce our wonderful facilitator coming back to host our civic engagement series. We have Amanda Westbrook with us tonight. Amanda has hosted Tacoma's NATOA-award-winning CityLine, a weekly economic and cultural affairs program for almost 2 decades. She's acted as Master of Ceremonies for countless Northwest events, including for GSBA several times. And as a natural storyteller and educator, she wafts and weaves her local tradition with urban progress. Her compassion is her greatest gift, which she shows as she connects with causes and people of her community. And we are so happy to welcome her back. Amanda, it is always a pleasure to have you.
Well, Mr. Matt, thank you so much. And a huge thank you to your team at GSBA for organizing all this, and also for our Carlos, who is doing a lot of the technical aspects of this. So thank you to both of you. And welcome to those who have joined us on this very blustery afternoon. We will be joined by one other candidate at 6 o'clock, and that is Zack. Zappone. He will be here after he's done doorbelling. Wow, in this weather. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we are going to do is I am going to have each of you do a quick 30-second introduction. Obviously, your name, which running for which race, and a very brief campaign statement. So let's start with Callie first. Callie Clark.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. My name is Kaylee Clark, and I'm running for Sammamish City Council, position number 5. There's a lot of reasons I chose to run, but one of them was that we've never had an out LGBTQIA member out here, and I really want to, be a voice for our residents, represent the diversity in our residents, and really hope to have a committee where we can, policies that we're building on and making sure we're including this consideration. So I thank you guys for all of your work and for hosting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Dante Payne, would you also please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dante Payne. I'm a candidate for Olympia City Council position 6, which is an at-large position. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I spent 6 years in the U.S. Army, which is how I ended up here in Washington. I was stationed at JBLM for 2 years. I deployed twice to Afghanistan in my 6 years. And since that time, I have worked as a regional representative in the office of Governor Inslee, and I now serve as the Deputy District Director to Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland. And I am running for City Council because in the time that I have been here in Olympia, my family and I, we dropped our anchor here in Olympia, and we decided we wanted to call this place a permanent home. And we've noticed some very subtle and drastic changes in that time. That we've lived here. And so what I'm running on is addressing the homelessness crisis and advocating for more permanent supportive housing and affordable housing, as well as improving public safety and addressing our greenhouse gas emissions to make sure that we are passing policies to uphold the thirst and climate mitigation plan. And so that's what I want to work on if I'm elected to the City Council come next week. And thanks for having me.
Dante, thank you so much for that. Carmen Rivera. Hello, Carmen.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's Carmen Rivera. A lot of people add that extra I, it's okay. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running for Renton City Council, position 2. And I was born and raised in Renton, Washington. And one of the big reasons why I'm running is because I come from a background in social services, working with marginalized and underrepresented youth and young adults. And I want to bring that lived experience and work experience with Renton City Council because it is something that is sorely lacking. I would actually also be the first openly queer person to ever serve on Renton City Council if I have the opportunity to be elected, which I think is much overdue for 2021 because lived experience matters. And as someone who's born and raised in Renton and knows how our city has grown and changed and our region has grown and changed, I'm ready to really take on all the problems proactively and pragmatically. So thank you so much for having me here again today.
Oh, Carmen, our pleasure. And having a quick snack up there in the corner is Dave Upthegrove.
That's what happens when this is over the dinner hour. I think. Well, my name is Dave Upthegrove. I grew up in Burien and I now live in Des Moines with my husband, Chad. I'm in my second term serving on the King County Council and am running for re-election this year in District 5, which is in South King County. It includes most of the city of Kent, a big chunk of Renton, the south tip of Burien, all of Normandy Park, Des Moines, SeaTac, and one precinct in Tukwila. And Lord knows if I'm any good at this, but I have this cool last name, Upthegrove, so people keep voting for me. And after 12 years in the State House and now 2 terms on the King County Council, I am best known for one thing. I am the only elected official in the state of Washington with a prepositional phrase for a last name. Remember that? That's my claim, Upthegrove. But I'm running for re-election because we face huge challenges as we come out of this pandemic, getting homeless individuals off the street and into housing with services, doing a better job of providing public safety, getting our economy going again. And I think we need proven leadership to build on the progress we've made. And I look forward to answering questions tonight.
There we go. You do have just the most amazing last name. I can only imagine what happened to you in elementary and high school with that last name.
Indeed, you can imagine the variations.
I sure can. So Dave, while I have you, we're going to go in reverse order. And my question for you is, what issue or person inspired you to stand up and run for office? Because you have some chops when it comes to doing this.
I didn't plan this. This wasn't my life career. I studied environmental science and biology, and I wanted to go into outdoor education. That was my plan. I spent all my summers working at teaching environmental ed to kids. And I have to say it was probably my mentor, who was State Senator Julia Patterson, because I, quite frankly, was unemployed out of college. I'd done student government. A family friend said, you know, they always hire young people down in Olympia for these part-time jobs during session. My best friend was going to be an intern that year. So I thought, cool, I can go live with my buddy. And I got a job as a clerk, filling the water glasses, sharpening the pencils. And my friends would ask me, you know, it was for the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So my friends would ask me, what does that job entail? And I would explain that my job is to handle the budget. And then when I'm done photocopying it, I have to hand it back. But I got to sit in on all these hearings and surrounded with bright people and get to listen to the debate and realize this might be something I'm interested in. And I went to work for my hometown senator, attending, you know, replying to thousands of constituents and attending hundreds of community meetings. And so when she left, I thought, heck, I've been doing all the work. I can do this. And I actually came out of the closet that year I first ran for office. And my mentor at the time said, I love you, Dave. That's great that you understand this about yourself, but obviously you can't run for office now. Because the thought of an out gay legislator deep in South King County at that time in what was a swing district was just unheard of. But I built a big diverse community coalition and made history as the first out LGBT legislator outside the city of Seattle in the history of the state. And I like to share that because I think too often we put limitations on ourselves. And if we believe in something and we think we can do a good job, don't let other people say, no, you can't do this because of who you are.
What a great story. Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. Carmen, why did you decide to run?
Similarly, it was never in the cards for me. I never planned on running. I never thought I would pursue a career in politics. I still don't consider myself a politician. I consider myself an academic first and a politician second, but a public servant always. And that's what I want to bring to politics. And that's what I've seen happen in my lifetime is politics continuing to happen to us. And again, I was born and raised in Renton. I've seen, in my lifetime since I was born in '89, the population has grown 150%. But our transportation, our social services, our public safety, things like that, our housing has not grown in that same manner. And so in the last few years, I've worked with youth and young adults who are out of school, homeless, and in foster care. I worked for King County under the WIOA program at Youth Source, which was in Renton, but then moved to Tukwila. And it worked with, again, youth who were out of school, gaining their GEDs, high school diplomas, also placing them in on-the-job training opportunities and internships, which we saw a great success. And working with this population in my region, in my neighborhood, in my community, opened my eyes to so much more that we could be doing at the city level. And then last year, a little less than a year ago, the Renton City Council actually passed an ordinance that was going to make it very difficult for a homeless shelter to exist within Renton city limits. Dave Upthegrove actually spoke to this in the 11th LD debate last week. And it was a decision I know that he did not agree with, I did not agree with, but it did pass, unfortunately. And seeing it pass, that was what actually fueled my fire made me decide to run. Because I was like, this is unacceptable. We can't keep passing the buck when it comes to this homeless crisis. And that's what I've seen happen in my lifetime. Get people to continually passing the buck and it just because we don't want to deal with it. Well, as someone who's worked with this population, as someone who's worked in this community, we need to deal with it. We need to be proactive about it. And that's why I decided to run, because it felt like my experience working at the state. I worked at a juvenile prison called Echo Glen Children's Center, and then working for the county, working with youth. Everything just fell into line to be like, okay, this is where I need to go now. It was a seat that was being challenged by 4 other opponents, and it was a really thick race. And I got through the primary with the largest percentage of votes at 38%. And it was incredible. But now it's getting even more contentious because, like a lot of races in King County, we're seeing a lot of progressive versus a lot of non-progressives. And that is the same to be hold true in Renton. And we could see for the first time in our history, a Renton City Council that is a progressive majority, not a moderate or conservative, but a progressive majority. And that could be life-changing for our city, especially as the 4th most populated city in King County. We need strong progressive advocates with lived experience, work experience in this community who can advocate at the King County level. As someone who worked with Best Starts for Kids and that levy that got passed, there is a map, I believe on the 4th or 5th floor of King County, that will show you where all that money has been allocated and where it's been allocated. And there's a huge disproportionality in South King County. They recognize that. And so we need leaders in Renton, Kent, Des Moines, Burien, and all areas advocating strongly for our cities, because South King County has been left behind. And that's why, as someone who's always advocated and spoke very loudly and passionately for people who've been underserved and underrepresented, I want to continue to do that at the city level for Renton.
Carmen, thank you so much for that. Dontae, who inspired you to run for office?
I don't know if I have a person per se that has inspired me, although I certainly have people that I look up to and admire. I would say it really started for me, getting involved in politics really started during my time in the military. I served for 1 year under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. And a year after I joined, it was repealed. And when it was repealed, it was at that time that I actually started to notice that there were real life implications, not only for myself, but for other people to simply be who they were and live their lives authentically and continue to hold their jobs and keep their careers in the military was life changing. And that's when I really started to pay attention, like, this politics stuff really matters. Policy really does impact people in very direct ways. And so a lot of times, like many people, politics becomes personal. And that's when you sort of, you have skin in the game, and so you step up. And that's kind of what happened to me. I started to become more active. Obviously, I had voted in presidential elections previously, but I had never really paid attention to who our local officials are or state elected officials and things like that. And so when I moved to Olympia, Being originally from the East Coast, I had never seen such visible homelessness the way it exists here on the West Coast with entire camps and things. I had never seen that before. And it was just very heart-wrenching to me. And I just felt that there's only so many times that I could give money and hand out food, and I just still felt like I wasn't doing enough. And that was really sort of the start of what else could I be doing to contribute and give back to the community that I have done so well in. You know, we decided to live here because there were great opportunities here for us. And my stepping up and running for office is really about that. It's about paying back and reaching back to the community that has done so well for me and my family, and I want the same for other people. And so homelessness was that issue that just really pulled at me. And then I started to notice that there were increasing public safety concerns in the city of Olympia as well. And then I started to notice that there was all this talk of police reform and things of that nature. And we had, at the time, no members of color on the Olympia City Council. Even now, if I'm elected next week, I will be the first Black male to serve on the Olympia City Council. Councilmember Cora Pinson was she was the first Black woman elected to any city council in the state of Washington over 30 years ago here in Olympia. So it's been 30 years since there's been a Black person on council. There's never been a Black male. And to my knowledge, I would be the first openly LGBTQ person of color to serve on the Olympia City Council. And so I'm looking forward to doing so.
Thank you so much, Dante. And last but certainly not least, Kelly, let's talk about why you decided to step up and run.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, at the beginning of this year, I had a failed election for a conservation district. I was like, you know what? I worked for Department of Natural Resources for 8 years. I'm born and raised in Spokane, but lived on the west side, you know, kind of like the latter half of my adult life. And so I really kind of saw that as an opportunity to, you know, with my knowledge and my background, to really make a difference in that conservation district level. And there was like, I think 10 people running for one seat. So I definitely did not get it. But after that, it was a really odd thing. I had somebody from the Kirkland City Council emailed me, was like, I took note that you're from Sammamish, you should run for city council. I was like, yeah, no. I was like, I don't run for things. And then I had somebody that's on the city council right now reach out to me, and then somebody in the 45th legislative district that I'm a part of also reach out to me. And so it was kind of like a weird, this is like happening too many times to ignore it. And, you know, the reason I initially chose to run for that district position was really because I was like, what am I doing? You know, I had a lot of time to think, like I'm sure everyone does in this pandemic. You know, I've been a public servant my entire career. I've worked for state, local, federal. And so I really was like, what is my next step? And how can I better the community around me? So yeah, I took the jump in, I think it was March, finally decided. It took quite a while, but you know, I'm really excited for the opportunity. We have a really cool city out here. It's very different. I'm sure everyone will say their city's different, but mine's the most unique. No. And so I'm just really excited to get to work for a community that's, you know, ever changing, ever evolving. And, you know, we have a lot of problems to solve, and I'm super excited to get started. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. Well said. So as I've been listening to all four of you, there is a common thread within your communities, which I find very interesting and but not surprising. And each of you have talked about in one way or another the unhoused issue in your community. And so all of you come from very different communities and you represent different demographics. Dontae, let's start with you. You mentioned that when you and your family decided to put roots into Olympia, that you were surprised at the unhoused population. And of course, I've been to Olympia. I live in Tacoma, and Tacoma has tent cities, and so does Olympia. What do you think would be your first thing that you would accomplish should you be elected to affect the unhoused?
Well, first, I think the first thing that I would do is continue advocating, as I have been on the campaign trail, for us to adopt a county-wide home fund. We did this as a city, but really, we need a regional response down here in Thurston County. It cannot just be on the city of Olympia to respond to this. About the majority of our homeless population here is in fact from Thurston County, contrary to some people's beliefs about where folks are coming from. They are indeed from here, the vast majority. And so what I intend to do is continue advocating for that county-wide home fund, because I believe that's the funding we're going to need to really have a robust response to this. Some of the other issues that exist are sort of some of the legal barriers around removing people from public space unless you have a safe alternative shelter to put them in. And so that means that our local governments have a responsibility to provide that safe and alternative shelter so that we can clean up all of the unmanaged encampments around our city. And so that means using that funding to continue building managed transitional shelter, and also using that funding to provide permanent supportive housing so that we are creating a pipeline to get people out of homelessness while at the same time we can begin to clean up the unmanaged encampments we see around the city. And I think that's not just for the city of Olympia, but that needs to happen with a countywide effort.
Well said. Carmen, you talked about this in your opening statement about, I think you used the phrase, the homelessness in Renton. If you are elected, being the hometown girl that you are, what will you do to help ease this issue?
Well, one, I want to work with the homeless population, those who are houseless currently, to learn what they need. Renton has so few social service programs and resources. We need to work with King County to bring more of those resources and programs down here. It is a multifaceted issue. Homelessness is not a monolith, right? It's not all about people who are addicted or are dealing with mental health crises or unemployment. It's a variety of all of these things. And so we need true wraparound services, which is something I've learned from as someone who's been a part of wraparound services in terms of mental health, chemical dependency, but also workforce development. This is usually the missing piece that I find. And this is where I think that we could really be the most proactive, especially in the city of Renton, the home to Renton Technical College. The first step, the most tangible step, is updating Renton's community needs assessment for human services. That hasn't been updated since 2014. And so we actually need to update that so we have the data and the information to know where we need to invest things in terms of our human services. The Renton City Council also voted during this election year to reorganize the Human Services Division and to combine it with communities, recreation, or communities and neighborhoods. And so, and they've also increased the human services budget, almost tripled it to be over 300 million, when it used to be about 800,000. And so all of that new stuff that's happened just this year, we need leadership that has been in the trenches, working on the ground to allocate those funds effectively so we see the biggest bang for our buck. So updating the needs assessment and investing in workforce development in addition to mental health and chemical dependency. And now workforce development could be resume development, interviewing skills, helping people get on the job training opportunities, apprenticeships, employment pipelines. One way a city can really invest in its own economy is employment pipelines in the city, also career exploration programs within the city. A city has such a vast variety of different workforce in terms of public service, recreation, housing, all of those. We can place interns that don't necessarily need college degrees in those on-the-job training opportunities, programs, a career pipeline to help foster our own economy, our own workforce, so we're seeing people become successful in our own community.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Dave, now that you've finished your dinner, let's talk about the unhoused and homelessness in this huge district that you are in. I mean, it's pretty much the from the in-between after Tacoma up to Seattle. So, and of course, as I drive that, and being someone that grew up here, I notice a tremendous amount of people who are living in tents, living on the street, living in shopping carts. And as you look at that, approaching your second term, what solutions do you see?
Thank you. Housing is a human right, and this means we have a responsibility to help the chronically homeless get off the streets and into housing with services and support. And getting folks housed, supported, and stabilized literally saves lives and is the right thing to do. It reduces police calls, reduces hospital visits, and saves taxpayer money in the long run. And that's why I was proud to help lead the effort on the King County Council recently to pass a big, bold new housing proposal. And the cool part is the housing already exists. We don't have to build it. Many hotels and nursing homes have closed and are for sale at very low prices. And that's why we are immediately investing about $350 million to purchase available hotels and group living facilities in cities that are willing. No more bureaucratic plans, no years and years of slow and expensive construction. It's action now. And with this investment, we will move more than 1,600 chronically homeless individuals off the street and into stable long-term housing. The residents will receive on-site support, including mental health and addiction services. And what I believe we need to do looking forward is I look forward to using my experience and relationships to build support for these investments in South King County. And if we're successful, we will have saved lives and improved the quality of life from Renton to Kent, from SeaTac to Des Moines, all throughout that big district you represented. Working together, we can do big things. We just need to have the courage to act.
Well said. Thank you, Dave. Kaylee, you, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You are.
I got it. All
You
right.
got it.
We're only a half hour in and I get it. Now, Kaylee, when I think about Sammamish, I think idyllic.
Be nice.
No, bucolic, beautiful, some of the most gorgeous scenery. I don't think about, and maybe I need to take a little ride there, I don't think about the unhoused, homeless, or any tent cities in Sammamish. Is my perception correct?
So we do actually host a tent city sometimes, tent city number 4. They kind of go back and forth between a couple of our churches, but you are correct. We have a very unique situation out here where, the annual medium income is so high that we're having, a really big struggle with this lack of housing. So, 85-87% are single family homes. We do have a small block of Habitat for Humanity, and then another small block in an area of Klahani that got annexed to us that is affordable or low income housing. But other than that, we really don't have anything at all. And so that's kind of been, an internal struggle. And as I was doorbelling, it was so interesting. Somebody was like, well, what are you going to do about the Redmond hotel in the Silver Cloud Inn? I was like, oh, well, that's Redmond. But, I would love to learn more. And he was angry about it. And so it was just really interesting to me that I was like, oh, we don't want it here, we don't want it close to us. So it was just a really kind of eye-opening thing for me to kind of really understand and really look into. So, I think somebody had mentioned before, is really looking at this kind of from a regional perspective. We have the money, we have resources here. So I'd really like to be able to incorporate other housing, a diversity of housing. We're struggling keeping teachers and firefighters here on the plateau because they can't afford to live here, but they work here. So we're having like our Starbucks closes at noon or 12 or 2, and we're having like, yeah, which is, I know, panic up here because we don't have coffee up here. So we're just having like this massive turnover, and, small businesses are struggling. We really have like really high commercial lease costs. And so it is, it's a thing. And it's, it kind of affects us here because we're really not, from what I see, we're not opening our doors and opening our city to really like let people in. So I'm hoping we can really work together and get some more diversity of housing and really be able to help out.
Well said. And I would like to welcome into our Zoom chat, Zack Zappone. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I'm late. My campaign manager has me cranking away at the doors until dark.
Well, okay, I gotta say, just for me, wow. I mean, I'm in Tacoma and it's raining sideways and it's blowing here. And so by the look of your hairstyle, I think you may have run into the same kind of weather there, Mr. Zack.
A little windy, but at least it was sunny today.
Zack, I want to ask you this question so we can kind of get you up to date here. Can you give us a quick 30-second introduction about which race you're running for and a brief campaign statement?
Yeah, I'm Zack Zappone. I'm running for Spokane City Council in the northwest part of Spokane, where I was born and raised. I'm a teacher, public school, high school teacher at my old high school. And running because I believe everyone deserves a fair shot. I left Spokane for college and saw massive inequalities across the country. And so I came back and got skills to serve our community as a teacher, got frustrated and got my master's in public policy and urban planning. And now I work in public health, and I also teach part-time, working on a lot of the issues I'm sure you have come up if you haven't talked about it, but affordable housing, homelessness, public health and safety, and then infrastructure and economic development.
I love that. Thank you so very much. So Dontae, we're going to start with you with this new question. And the question is, what are central issues facing your community at the moment? Because each of you represents a very different community. We have talked about homelessness, so that's already mentioned. But for you, Dontae, in Olympia, in Thurston County, what are you seeing that really needs your time rolling up your sleeves?
Sure. Thank you for this question. It's a very important one. I think two in particular that comes to mind, and in addition to homelessness, obviously, which we just covered, that would be affordable housing development. We absolutely need more. We have a lot of market rate development, which is fine for the city of Olympia, but we also need to up the ante on our affordable housing development as well. So that's something that I would like to work on. I would like to have public-private partnerships and try to encourage and incentivize developers to help us to develop more affordable housing. Public safety is a huge one. The city of Olympia currently has an interim police chief at the moment. We just had our previous interim police chief has retired. And so that position has been vacant for some time in terms of a permanent police chief. And so it will be very important to the community to make sure that we appoint someone who understands systemic racism and its implications on themselves as a person, and also in policing and how it shows up in our community, as well as making sure that we appoint someone who understands all of the new state statutes that have come out of the state for various cities to implement. And that'll be very important for the next police chief to understand and to be able to execute. Olympia also is the seat of our state government, which means we draw a lot of people here who are not from our community for various demonstrations. And what we've seen in the past is a lot of political violence, rioting and vandalism. And so it would be very important to have the next police chief be someone who has experience in de-escalating these types of situations without abuse of authority. And so that will be extremely important. And I'm looking forward to serving on the council so that we can address some of these very dire public safety improvements we need in our community.
Very well said. Thank you, Dante. Zack, when you think about central issues facing your community at this moment, you mentioned when you went away to college, you saw a lot of inequity, then you came back to Spokane, put some roots down. I believe you're an English teacher, is that correct? Oh, there we go. You can correct our speeches here. So now that you're back and you're teaching in the same high school that you went to, how are those issues different than what you grew up with?
Ooh, interesting question. So I left in 2009, so different economic recession at that time. And I mean, I got involved in education because I saw, like, I was one of 3 students from Eastern Washington at Georgetown. My roommate was one of 22 boys from an all-boys private school in New Jersey. And so I really was at that time saying, like, oh, education is the key difference in economic opportunity. But after being in the classroom, I really saw how teachers worked really hard and we're doing a lot of good stuff, but it's really hard to overcome poverty and other lack of resources in our community. And so that's why I wanted to focus more on policy and politics and looking at how can the city provide a system of opportunity for students. A big issue of that is housing and making sure we have diverse housing in our neighborhoods, socioeconomic neighborhoods. That changes the composition of our schools. If we're concentrating poverty, we're concentrating a lot of issues. Big need for mental health. I think that's grown in the last years. And that's a big issue around public safety too, and looking at how we can evolve our public safety system and get mental health crisis responders and growing that. We have more telehealth in our schools. It's one of the projects I'm working on, and how can we treat those issues early on so they don't escalate to be worse later. Housing stability in general. Spokane pre-pandemic and post-pandemic is a different world. We like to blame all you Seattle folks for moving over here and driving up our housing prices. Of course, it's still way different than your market, but we did see some of the highest rental increases in the country over the last summer, 20 to 50% rent increases. And so people, seniors on fixed incomes, everyone, really middle and working class families are really feeling the pinch right now and feeling the stress and trying to get over the pandemic. I would say those are some of the key drivers right now.
Thank you, Zack. So Carmen, in that Renton where you grew up and now you're running for office, what are the central issues facing Renton? Because there are a lot of them, but what keeps you awake at night?
There are a lot of things that keep me awake at night. I'm fearful that Renton is going to be making the same mistakes as Seattle. I'm fearful that we are not going to lean into our growth. We are going to fight it. We're going to pass the buck, and we're going to make the same mistakes as the politicians of our past. When it comes to keeping Renton has a lot of small town vibes. They have a really small, like, based community. But again, it's the 4th largest city in King County. So how do we maintain that community while also leaning into our growth and not fighting it? And I think I agree with Zack a lot in the fact that we need, like, progressive land use policies. We need multifamily housing. We need diverse housing options. But we definitely don't need any more single family homes starting at $1.2 million like we're seeing in the Highlands being built right now. And so it's addressing that and making sure that we're also not developing our natural wetlands, protecting our tree coverage. Because one thing that makes Renton in the Pacific Northwest so beautiful and unique is our greenscape, our tree coverage, and making sure that our wetlands are protected. And so the environment keeps me up at night. Our housing crisis, the houseless community is probably what tears at me the most, because I was out, me and my co-candidate, Joe Todd, he ran for position 1, I'm running for position 2. We'll go out and put up signs at like 11 o'clock at night. It's low traffic and, less likely you're going to get hit by a car, right? But we see a lot of the houseless community in downtown Renton, down there by the Walmart, down there on Grady. And there is so much going on we need more services down here. And we need people who care and have a really compassionate lens that are going to go to these people and ask, what do you need? What can we do for you? And not be thinking that there is just like, that homeless people are a negative blight. They're not that. They're human beings. They're people. And giving them that like identity and treating them as equals. I want to treat them as equals. And I know that there are other people that might not see them as equals. And that's the problem. And that's another thing that I think Renton is really battling with is equity and addressing hate in our community, hate speech, hate crimes. Renton has a slogan, you know, hate has no home here, but that is very performative in my opinion. There is very little outcry from the leaders that we have against the hate that is actually in existence in Renton. And the fact that, you know, there are even leaders that condone hate speech in our community, that they don't say, hey, they don't address it, they don't call it out, they either ignore it or through their own inaction and passivity, they're condoning it. And, you know, in February, we had an incident on YouTube that hit YouTube. It went viral of a woman spreading hate speech and using a racial slur against a person of color. And it was, when I watched it, it just reminded me of how I grew up in Renton as a biracial woman. I got called a spick when I was 14 years old, like it was nothing. And that's something I've experienced over and over again, especially running for elected office. The things that I have seen in the comments and the hate, like there is a serious issue here in Renton, and we need to be able to call it out without being called a bully, which is coded language we often use against women of color who speak up and speak out. But the first step in solving any problem is addressing it. And so for me, I'm just somebody who's very good at addressing issues, but also saying, okay, so let's now solve them. And that's what I want to do is from writing my first op-ed for Renton or about Renton called Racism and Running Rampant in Renton. I saw a lot of blowback and a lot of positive feedback. People being like, finally, people are paying attention to Renton. And other people being like, this isn't the Renton I know. Well, just because it's the Renton you don't know doesn't mean it doesn't happen and it doesn't exist. We are now a BIPOC majority city. That has happened in my lifetime. And we have not changed with that. And our leadership does not currently reflect that, unfortunately. We need to make sure that we are, if we're not going to reflect that in our leadership, that we're going above and beyond to engage those communities, those marginalized communities, those communities of color, our Black leaders, and asking what can we do for them.
All right. Dave Upthegrove, 5 different kind of districts in there, and it's a hard question to say what central issues are facing each community at this moment, but I know you can do it.
Well, it's actually not that hard when you're out knocking on doors all the time and listening to people. In addition to homelessness, I think the other 2 priorities that I hear the most about and look forward to tackling are improving public safety. And it really, really has surprised me. Sometimes you knock on doors, you know whether you're going to a Democratic door or a Republican door. And the number of Democrats who say their top concern is the property crime in their neighborhood, the mail theft, the porch theft has really surprised me. And so I think as we improve our public safety system to better advance justice and have more accountability, we can't take our eye off public safety. And we need to be smart about how we do that, but we also need to make sure we have the resources to deliver that. And then the other issue that I think is on the top of people's minds is as we come out of this pandemic, how are we going to actually create jobs and good paying jobs with benefits and help small businesses get going, the economic boost. And obviously King County government isn't going to magically solve the economic problems of the world, but there's things we can do. There's, you know, we invest in infrastructure. And if we got down in my neck of the woods in the Green River Valley, if we got those flood levees fixed, we could save money on prevent costly flood insurance and prevent development restrictions. You know, if we can manage our wastewater system better and our capital planning, we can keep utility rates low for businesses and individuals. And then also invest our limited dollars in targeted ways. I want to see us implement a new green jobs program that I got funded for Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth. And we actually funded it out of our flood district funds. of all places. And, we're investing in apprenticeship programs in partnership with the school districts, and we're investing in pipelines and behavioral health. We have shortages of mental health and substance abuse, addiction disorder workers. And so I think King County can help also in those kinds of ways to help build an economy where actually everyone has opportunity, and there's a lot of people worrying about whether their grandkids are going to be able to get a job out of college, and whether or not you can make enough money to even pay your rent. So I think homelessness, public safety, and our economy are the issues that are on the top of people's minds.
Thank you, Dave. Kaylee, as I said before, I think you probably have the smallest area that you are running in, but at the same time, small areas really show their issues. I mean, there's nowhere to hide. There's no finger to point that says it's not on my watch. So Kaylee, what are you seeing coming out of COVID that needs to be addressed in your community?
Yeah, so I think, when you first asked this question, a couple things come to mind. Our human and social services budget is less than 1% of our operating budget, and we only have a 3/4 FTE that's actually dedicated to that in our city staff. So that to me, my fiance, she's a mental health therapist, so she's always like, if she's not up at night, then I am. So I really want to bring that kind of to the forefront and really focus on how we can have resources here, because it really ties into, we don't have a lot of public transportation here. I currently drive 15 minutes the other way to catch a bus to Seattle, because we have one bus route that's actually through here. And so we have just a lot of things that aren't connected. Another thing that I would think of, coming out of the pandemic. So I'm an emergency manager at Sound Transit. So this is kind of like a thing that I think about a lot as well. And we had the power was out yesterday for 12, 14 hours or something. And, I was losing my mind, but that I didn't even think, who else is losing food or anything else with this power outage. And we don't really have, we have an emergency manager here that we contract through Eastside Fire and Rescue, but we don't have a lot of self-preparedness or city preparedness, I don't think. So I really want to look at, expanding our plans and really diving deep in lessons learned over this last couple of years on what we can do better and the things that we need to sustain as well. And I guess lastly, I do want to bring up that, we as a city don't have any climate action plan here. One of my first things that I really want to do is get it an environmental and climate crisis committee started, citizen-led. I really think that, like I said, a lot of this kind of dovetails into each other, but I think that's going to be also really crucial as well. So thank you.
You're welcome. So we have a question from our audience, and I always love it when the audience jumps in. So this is a question for all of you, and here it is. I appreciate the comments about jobs and economy. What policies will you implement that make a difference for people seeking careers in your district? And Dontae, I'm going to start with you, because Olympia has the hubbub and the buzz of all of our elected officials down there.
Sure. So thank you for this question. I see this opportunity for jobs is a very important one for Thurston County, because we are growing our region of the state. More people are moving south, particularly those who are on the western part of the state. So there is a lot of opportunity to find employment gaps or industries, if you will, that can thrive in Thurston County. Some of those look like recreation and more retail. I think Thurston County needs more of it. And in fact, the demand for it will be even higher. So that is one way that we will see an expansion of job opportunities in the region. I also see with our work in addressing the climate crisis, the opportunity for renewable sources of energy. That also creates opportunities for jobs in our region as well. We are working towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Our county's plan says that we need to do so by 45% within 9 years by 2030. And so that's another opportunity when we're talking about sidewalk improvement, when we're talking about expanding transit, making Olympia more walkable, and just making sure that we have plenty of opportunity for people to work on sustainable construction and housing development. That's where I see all of the openings for a lot of job opportunities for folks here in the region. And I'm really looking forward to helping move that along for people in our community.
Dante, thank you. I want to ask Carmen, because Carmen has to get to class. She's a big multitasker, but I want to hear what kind of employment opportunities and careers you will bring if you are elected to the city of Renton.
Well, as the only candidate is endorsed by the labor unions. I'm endorsed by ML King Labor, the Northwest Carpenters Union, plumbers and pipe fitters, the metro drivers, all the labor unions have endorsed my candidacy because we are going to work together with Renton Technical College to give people careers. Employment pipelines can be career opportunities. Apprenticeship programs is something that we highly underutilize, but we need more people in our trades. We have not enough people in the trades, and that's something I really want to help foster through grant programs, but also the city of Renton needs to adopt a community workforce agreement. So we can set a standard for hiring locally, but also utilizing apprenticeship utilization and utilizing construction programs and construction companies that utilize apprenticeships and local apprenticeships. We need to partner more with RTC and see where we can foster more of that outflow and incubation for our small businesses in the city of Renton to give people not only the food or the fish, but the how to fish, right? Teaching them the skill set while also meeting their immediate needs through social services, but also and I'm trying to keep train on my train of thought, but through social services, but also like getting them bus tickets so they can get to work. Because transportation is usually a huge blockade when it comes to workforce development and getting a job. But housing, we need to get people housed, and we need to make sure that we are fostering a long-term homeless shelter, transitional housing in the city of Renton. It needs to happen. We can't fight it any further. But we need to get people housed immediately, but we also need to get people into the apprenticeship programs and get them the hours they need, because some people can do an apprenticeship program, but they need the hours to get the licenses. And so that's where those community workforce agreements come in. So the city, in those infrastructure projects that they're funding and they're investing in, that we're utilizing the apprenticeships that we have here in the city to fund those infrastructure projects. You see where I'm going? Because then it becomes a cycle of what we're investing in. We're really seeing the biggest bang for our bucks. And that's why I want to get elected, so I can get behind the veil of those contract negotiations and ask the hard-hitting questions so we can see the long-term results for these immediate investments that we're making.
Thank you, Carmen, for that. Zack, I grew up spending a lot of time, my summers in Spokane. And even back then, I'm dating myself, it seemed a little quiet. It seemed like the downtown was really awake at times, but beautiful downtown. So I grew up thinking that there were hardly any businesses in Spokane. So same question for you, in the sense of, now that we're coming out of COVID, how do you revitalize and be a part of that catalyst that makes jobs viable?
Yeah, well, I like to dispel the sleepy myth of Spokane. You should come out and walk around on a Friday or Saturday night. We got a thriving nightlife and scene, and things are exciting. I won't go there. We are close to Idaho, so it's been a pandemic that's been interesting in Idaho. But that does go to some of our strengths in Spokane and our tourism as a region, as a hub for the region. To grow that, I am running against a small business owner. He owns a fast food restaurant, but he actually has next to no ideas about how to grow the economy for local or for small and middle class families. I asked him in a debate, and he shrugged and said, "I'm pretty new to this." But I've been working on looking at economic development policies and how we can grow that for middle and working class families. And so I think first is looking at what our strengths is in education and healthcare. We are the hub for hospitals in the region. Idaho's sending their patients over here. And so how can we grow around those industries and build up manufacturing jobs and good paying jobs around those industries? So we're building the supplies and the machines that we're using here in our hospitals. We're training doctors here in Spokane to go out to the rural regions of the area. And that's with the new med school downtown. We got a whole new university district in Spokane. So how can we keep supporting those and growing those? I also agree that we need to have workforce training and apprenticeships, and we're seeing the silver tsunami of the building and construction trades retiring. So how can we partner with schools and use the city as a resource to bolster those trades? And then just broadband internet. There are still parts of Spokane that lack access to affordable, quality broadband internet. And we're now in a post-pandemic economy where virtual jobs and remote jobs are the future, and they're here to stay. And so how can we create a thriving economy with cafes and parks where you can get access to the internet, have tech coding, and really train our workers here to get those jobs where they can compete around the country.
All right, Zach, thank you so much. All right, so Dave Upthegrove, let's talk with you for a bit here. Wow, jobs. Jobs are the name of the game, aren't they, Dave? And you have quite the breadth of space and income levels that you are dealing with right now.
Yep, and I kind of spoke to this in the last question a little bit, but I think you're right. And I think small businesses in particular are the largest provider when you look at sheer numbers of jobs. And so our challenge as a county government is, what role can we play to support small businesses? There's some areas where we have jurisdiction, the areas where there's no cities, they call those unincorporated areas, like Skyway, White Center, Vashon Island, the rural areas. And we have more tools at our disposal there, the things other people have talked about around land use. We hired an economic development director to work with local businesses in the community in those areas on community-based strategies. But really, at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing the county can do is around infrastructure. We're a service provider through the whole county, whether it's flood protection, whether it's keeping utility costs low through good management for your water, sewer, and delivering regular, reliable infrastructure. And also, as others have spoken to, we do run the bus system, Metro buses. And there have been several national studies recently that looked at what are the greatest barriers to people climbing the economic ladder. And I would have assumed education. That's what I would have guessed. But multiple studies have found that the greatest predictor of economic mobility is access to employment. So the more that we can invest in transportation in our bus system, the more we can connect people and employers. I also think although we have limited dollars, the direct investments we make as a county government in workforce development, specifically in areas where we're matching the needs of the businesses with good economic opportunities. My brother, for example, runs a small construction management company. They're not even investing in marketing anymore because they can't get enough employees to increase their work. And I hear this, you see it in the public sector too, whether it's Sound Transit or the county. So the investments we're making in building trades, apprenticeship programs, and partnerships are a twofold benefit. They're building that workforce that business needs, but these are also really good paying jobs with benefits. So we need to do more of that, but not just in the building trades, but in the other areas where we have shortages, such as healthcare and behavioral health. And I think those are some of the ways we can, as a county government, support businesses and good career-oriented jobs.
Thank you, Dave. And we're going to end with Kaylee.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. So, you know what I think, up here is we do really have a lot of people, a lot of Microsofties in this area, and a lot of people working from home right now. We don't have municipal broadband. So I kind of think about all of these things we have a monopoly up here of our internet. So just things like access to that is not available. I also, we have a Central Washington University Extension campus here in Sammamish, and I really want to look at partnering with them and our youth. We have like the most incredible youth. We don't have a newspaper up here, but we have the Sammamish Independent, which is run by all teenagers in high school. We have 3 high schools up here, and it's just such a cool and unique situation. So I really want to learn, I know this is like a young career oriented what I'm saying, but, I really want to hear from them and how we can support them finding jobs or being able to stay in Sammamish. What we're fighting right now is a lot of people, can't come back to Sammamish if they go to college. They can't necessarily afford to come back. And so I really think is, kind of getting a grasp on what the youth wants and needs and kind of like what they're looking for in their future. And we have a ton of like great organizations and areas up here. So I'd really like to look at partnering with mosques and temples as well. We have just a ton of organizations that I think we could, kind of partner together, really work for, kind of like GSBA, working for equality, really getting people behind each other and finding opportunities together. So whether it's, hosting job fairs, I know the MAPS, the Muslim does it in Redmond down there, they host job fairs sometimes. And so I think it'd just be a really, really important thing for us to bring here. And I'm excited to learn more from our community and really see how we can help them. So thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. Matt, I think our time has come to an end.
It has. Thank you, Amanda, for taking us through this conversation once again. And thank you to our 5 amazing candidates for joining us tonight. Even though GSBA doesn't endorse candidates, we are thrilled to have a chance for you all to share your visions for your communities, your futures, and be a great example for our audience of how people can step up and run for election in their own communities and make a difference. And I think it was Carmen who stated it in the beginning, politics happens to us. And I think that was, you are all great examples of that. You were all great public servants before you were running for office as well. So thank you for taking the time during the final stretches of the campaign season. We really appreciate it. Thank you and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.